Welcome to the Steady On podcast, where God's hard truth meets your hard story. I'm Angie Bauman, and this is episode 102, Donkey Sanctuary. And along with me today is New York Times bestselling author Susy Flory. Susy is the author or co-author of 16 books. She is the director of the West Coast Christian Writers Conference, and her book, Unbreakable Boy, has been adapted for screen with a cast including Patricia Heaton and Zachary Levi. Those awards and achievements, though, don't begin to paint a full picture of Susy's career, nor do they paint a full picture of her heart. As I've spent a little bit of time with Susy over the past couple of years, what I've come to cherish about her is her desire to teach and to give and to serve. So it is my privilege to share Susy with you today as we talk about her latest project, Sanctuary. It's a story that takes us to Ireland, teaches us spiritual truths through donkeys, and reminds us that we all need a place to be seen and known. My verse for this episode is Exodus 25:8. In it is the reason for sanctuary. Hear it from the NASB. Have them construct a sanctuary for me so that I may dwell among them. A sanctuary, a place set apart, a place that is safe. That's what the Lord dwelling among us provides us. And that's what the Lord dwelling inside us makes it possible for us to be to others. I know you are going to love and appreciate Susy the way I do. Get ready to be inspired. Let's listen in. Hello, Steady On community, and welcome into this podcast episode. I'm Angie Bauman, and with me today is Susy Flory. Susy, welcome to the Steady On community.
Thanks. So glad to be here, Angie.
We are going to be talking about Susy's new project, which is called Sanctuary. And I heard you say, I think on a different interview, and I think you just mentioned it before I pressed record, and that is that this has been a project about 4 years in the making. Do I have that right?
That's right. I got a random email from my website in 2018, and that's how this all started.
And so with all the work that you've done, and the awards that you've won and the different accolades, the different projects you've invested in, I would think that you probably have a lot of either random emails or offers, extensions of partnering with someone. And so before we even kind of get started into the questions I want to dive into, I want to ask you, why this project? What did it stir in you that you thought, yes, this is a place I want to spend this next, few months, years of my life?
I guess the quickest answer to that is I've been writing for a while now, almost 20 years. And so I've found kind of my lane. That's kind of a cliche, but it is something that you look for as a writer. You start out kind of thinking, I want to write a children's book. I want to write a romance. I want to write a self-help book, all these things. And as you get along, you kind of start to understand where you fit in and where your passions really lie, because you have to fall in love with the project to let that love carry you through years of work. And so that's just kind of what happened here. I fell in love with it because I love animals. I believe animals have healing power that God has given them. I love Ireland. For many reasons. And this story just touched my heart from that very first email.
So talk to us just a little bit about Patrick in the book, if you will. Give us just a little bit of background of who Patrick is. He has experienced PTSD. What's just a little bit of the backstory of this story you've crafted?
Yeah. So when I receive an email like this that I'm interested in, I immediately go research. I have a journalistic background, and so I dive right in and try to find out who it is and as much about them as I could. And what I found out just from that very first moment is that Patrick, which his name kind of cracked me up. I almost thought, Patrick from Ireland? Are you kidding me?
This is not a real email.
But he is, I know, he is.
Patrick
he
owes
is truly
something.
named for St. Patrick. Exactly. And he's named for St. Patrick. I just thought it was hilarious. His father inherited a piece of property in a very small village in the south of Ireland, and it's very rural. It's just these rolling, beautiful green hills, castles, stone walls, sheep, everything that you see in a movie about Ireland. That's what this place is like. And so Patrick grew up on this property, and his father started a donkey sanctuary. Ireland has many donkeys. They were used for work years and years ago. And as that work was taken over by tractors, these donkeys just became pets. And the problem with donkeys is they're like parrots. They live a long life. And so people would, they would age out of caring for these donkeys and just leave them by the side of the road, or they'd be abandoned in fields, sick, starving. And so the Barrett family began to take in these donkeys and bring them home and take care of them. And Patrick grew up in this atmosphere of rescuing these, desperate animals.
And so how did that turn into something more personal for Patrick?
So Patrick became, or maybe just was, like one of these sort of desperate, donkeys. He has he has ADD and is dyslexic. And so school was really tough for him. And the Irish model of education involves a lot of memory work. And so he would just mess up on that. He couldn't read well. He couldn't memorize. He always felt like he didn't belong. And the teachers sometimes would embarrass him and even beat him when he couldn't perform well. So he just grew up feeling like an oddball, feeling like he didn't fit. And the donkeys became his best friends. And his first best friend was a donkey named Aaron that was rescued from the Aran Islands. That's Aran. And he could feel what the donkey felt, and the donkey could feel what he felt. And they just had this deep bond of friendship beyond words that was really beautiful, that sustained him as a child.
And what did it teach you, like learning that about Patrick and his connection with the donkeys? Was there anything that it taught you about trauma or PTSD, or where did you kind of go with that, or where did you learn? What did you learn?
Yeah, so I was raised with horses myself. My dad was a Texas cowboy, and I started riding probably at the age of 5 or 6, something like that. I was on the back of a horse, from the earliest time I can remember, really. And this story really resonated with me because horses, I found over the years, like donkeys, we call it read your mind, but there's a deep connection there as they accept you into their herd and they take care of you. They care about you. And they're extremely sensitive down to the point where you feel like when you're on the back of a horse that it knows what you want to do and you don't have to do anything. I mean, it can sense all of your emotions. And so that really, resonated with me. And then I worked for a while, volunteered at an equine therapy center where children with different kinds of disabilities worked with the horses. And I was really skeptical at first. I kind of have a journalist skepticism, but I saw these children transform. Children who couldn't talk would talk to their horses as they were, taking care of them. And so I learned from Patrick that donkeys had the same ability, maybe even stronger, and that he found healing from PTSD coming back from the war zone. He had to go over to several places that were, there was ethnic cleansing going on, things like that, Kosovo and Beirut. Came back into the donkey sanctuary after a series of events and felt this bond, felt this healing power. The donkeys took care of him. And it was just something, that kind of brought me back to my childhood and my friendships with horses.
Yeah, I love the title of the book, Sanctuary. And I think because I'm a local church pastor and have been for 18 years. And over the time that I have served local churches, my understanding of what my job has changed. When I was a younger pastor, I thought my job was to like have a profound word, and I needed to impress people with my teaching and all that. And the Lord has really helped me open my heart to like, wow, it's really important that I handle the scripture carefully and prepare a message that is strong. And it's important that I take care of a flow of worship, and those kind of things. But the most important thing that I can do for any congregation I serve is to create a safe space, to create a space where they can come in and feel like they do belong. What you're saying, that they belong, that they are emotionally safe there, because that is where the Holy Spirit can do work, right? That is where the Holy Spirit can call them, convict them, encourage them, renew them, all of those things. But if we don't create a safe space, then so much work doesn't get done. And so as I listen to you talk about his relationship and what they're doing and the name of the book and all that, I feel his pain, and I feel this place where he can bring his pain and it's not too much and it's safe to be exactly who he is. And I think that's just beautiful.
I love that. All of us need a place to belong.
Yes.
And I think that's what church can give us, our faith community. It's what a herd of donkeys can give someone.
Yeah. And so I know in the book that Patrick says that his parents started the donkey sanctuary to save lost donkeys, which you talked about that problem in Ireland where they were, but that it did end up saving him too. And I wondered, can you share with us just a little bit of that process? How long was it before Patrick was in a place of greater peace? And what are some of the things maybe that happened that really kind of moved him forward in healing?
Yeah, when he came back from the army, he served, I want to say 5 or 6 years, if I'm remembering right. He didn't know what was wrong with him. There was no label, no diagnosis given him. He just knew he was in trouble. And there were several years where he was just lost. And PTSD was definitely the problem. He found that out later, and he's now kind of full circle. He's a counselor.
Wow.
For people who come back from the military with PTSD. So he didn't know what to do, and so he self-medicated. He just was a lost soul. And through a series of events, you can read about the book. I don't want to,
no spoilers, right?
Yeah, I can't go into too much, but he found himself at the top of the donkey sanctuary. There's it's a hill at the top with a 360-degree view, and there's pastures and donkeys all around. There's a rock up there that was part of a ruined watchtower, a stone watchtower, an ancient one. And he was up at that rock and he was praying and just asking God for help. So I really feel like reaching out, in a place where he felt safe, in a sanctuary, he reached out to God and asked for help, and God sent that help. And it was not only through the donkeys. There was an Irish nun named Marie who spoke into his life. His family came alongside him, the community, other people, but that was the moment where things turned around for him, was that desperate prayer. There's even a romance involved in this prayer, with his wife, and a connection there to this prayer, to this moment at the top of the rock. And so, it was a desperate cry.
Yeah.
And God answered that cry.
I love that so much, because in the world that we live in, I think there's so much emphasis on reaching the masses, if you will, right? Like building something and getting our name out there, or like you said, being known for something or whatever. But I hear, like, even in the nun that's in the story, right? This intentionality to pour in to the life of one person makes me emotional just think about it, but to invest in the life of one person, because while that may not change things for the masses, it can have the potential to change everything for the one. And how much God cares about the one in this whole, with the donkeys and the sanctuary, and I would say the prevenient grace that sanctuary was already there for him, when he recognized it and all that. It's just it's a beautiful way to illustrate how God does search for us relentlessly.
Absolutely. God hears our cries and answers us in ways that are very surprising.
So tell me something along the way that surprised you about yourself or about the work, something you found you didn't expect, anything like that happen?
Oh, continually. I start out with with every book, with every story, having an idea of what it's going to be, and then it becomes something else. It comes to life. I think books are alive, and they're in our hearts and minds, and in the hearts and minds of the reader. And that's what happened here. I think what surprised me is that when I went to Ireland in 2019, I went a couple of times to meet everyone, meet the donkeys, get to know Patrick as we worked together, and just to be in that place and be in that sanctuary, which is just beautiful. And what surprised me is that I intended to be able to have lots of conversations with Patrick, because that's what you do when you're working on a story together. And it ended up most of the time being me talking to him and his family. And so I think the culture there is different than ours because Americans are very individualistic and we have community, but it's loose and we limit the connections with our community for many reasons. And in Ireland, community and family and village life, it's everything. And so I would be sitting in his dad's kitchen, drinking tea and eating cookies, family all around, and it's a conversation between the whole family. And so the book is really a love letter, not only to donkeys, not only to Ireland, but to this idea of family and community that never abandons you, no matter how hard you try to push them away.
I want to ask a follow-up question on that because I know you said they reached out to you initially, but it's a really big deal to be given the opportunity to tell someone else's story, especially when you're talking about something really deep like personal healing and trauma and all that. And so what was that relationship like? Did they just trust you immediately? Did you feel like that needed to be earned? Or I don't know if I even have the right question, but what's that
Yeah.
like to be gifted with, you get to write my feelings?
I think of it as a sacred trust,
Mm.
much as I almost feel like it's a pastoral role.
Mhm.
And hear my heart on this. It's not, pastoring a church for
Mhm.
sure, but
Pastors come in all shapes and sizes and have all jobs. Yeah, it's
it's more than a friendship. It is almost more like being a sort of spiritual director or a
Mhm.
spiritual friend, if that makes sense. And it's hard for me to explain it, but there is a relationship of trust that happens because they are sharing their entire lives with you. Their whole life doesn't go into the story, but you're asking questions and they're opening their life to you. And you in turn have to treat it with care. You have to treat this relationship and the story that they're telling you with great care, and they have to feel safe with you. So I guess using the concept sanctuary,
Yeah.
there is a sort of sanctuary feeling that happens if this is if this is working and you're doing it right. And many times when I've worked with other people to tell their stories, there are moments to talk about deep spiritual things, and I love those moments. I feel kind of like the hair on my arms stand up when those
Yes.
when those moments happen and the spirit is there and you're talking about things that are important on a very deep level. And that's just a beautiful thing and a privilege for me
Yeah.
as a writer. I've never gotten over that feeling of just I can't believe that I get to talk to these people about these important things and that they trust me. And we get to talk about anything. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you love that because that just means that you have a great respect for I get to be almost like just the carrier, the messenger of someone else's message, but your heart's in it too. And I think that's a beautiful partnership. Do you have like I know the title is Sanctuary, and so I know probably part of the theme is, safe space for feelings and healings and finding your purpose and some of those things. But if there's a theme, like a major theme of encouragement or something like that, what would you say that the hope in it is? How would you describe that?
I mean, you just said the word. I
Okay.
think that there's hope.
Mm.
Uh, you know, Patrick has called himself a messer, which we don't really use that word here, but it's such a perfect word, for someone who has made a lot of mistakes in their
Yeah.
lives. And no one is beyond redemption. No one is outside, that circle of God's grace and forgiveness. He can give us a new heart and spirit. And that's what happened with Patrick. And when Patrick explains kind of, God entering his life and changing him, he said, God gave me new eyes, now
Wow.
I know I'm made in the image of God. So it's a completely different perspective.
Mm.
And that's such a beautiful thing to be a part of and to get to tell that story. So I think hope,
Yeah.
that there is always hope.
Did Patrick know, did he have a relationship with God before the experience that you were talking about? So he was a new believer after the war, or did he just come into a renewed, deeper understanding?
Yeah, I mean, most of
Is
Ireland,
that a
not,
spoiler? That's not a spoiler, right?
no,
Okay,
no,
good.
no. Yeah. Most of Ireland, not counting Northern Ireland, which is part of, the UK. Most of Ireland is Catholic. You have a church right in the middle of your town. You are christened there, and baptized there. You go, to school there, catechism. You're confirmed there. All of the major events of your life take place around that church. And so it's a very important part of your identity. But it depends on you as a person, how
Sure.
much, you're going to reach out and connect with God and what you want to learn and how you're going to apply that in your life. I got to go to church there several times with Patrick's family. It's a beautiful experience. Their faith is very strong. And so he had all of that background, but he saw God as an angry judge.
Okay.
And every time he made a mistake, that God was going to slam him and that he was probably going to go to hell, and he could never, ever please this God. And so that was his vision of God. He was frightened of that God as a child. And so, I think his faith kind of went into hibernation and just never really grew until he really, really, really needed God and kind of, turned back around and asked for help.
I think that's such a wonderful experience to document, though. I think so many people can relate to that, where I know of God, but then something happened to my life, and then I came to a place where I knew God. And those are very different experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think being around Marie, this,
Mhm.
nun that I mentioned, very tough Irish nun with a heart of gold, and just feeling that love,
Yeah.
God's love coming through her to him, her seeing him for who he really was, and knowing that there was hope. He could just feel it in her, sense that in her, and she reached out to him. And so it was really being around somebody who was full of God's love and light, that he could, feel that sense of hope again and reach out himself.
And I hear a calling in that to each of us, because we can be that to other people when we allow ourselves to be a reflection of God's love and light, as you said so well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Paying
have,
attention. Yeah.
yes,
Paying
yes.
attention to others
Yes,
and
and seeing
listening
them
to
and
them.
not looking away from the
Yep.
messers. I
Yep.
love that. I love that word. Yeah, because there is a created in his image person inside all of our messers, because we're all there at some point. Absolutely. Yeah. So I have to ask, kind of maybe like a sort of silly question, but did you see spiritual truths as you learned about donkeys? I think I know the answer to this, but what did you learn? Maybe what did you learn about
Absolutely.
God? Yeah, in watching and learning about the
Yeah.
donkeys. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm a huge animal lover. My daughter works in wildlife rehabilitation with
Mhm.
injured and orphan wildlife at our property here in the mountains in California. We have a barn full of these animals. She works for a local nonprofit, and animals have just been a part of my life forever. And so just seeing God's sense of humor, God's care, I mean, there's a scripture in Psalms that says God knows every bird in the mountains. He, this is his creation, and his part of who he is comes through when we, enjoy animals and appreciate them and care for them. And so I just was impressed by how this family took care of donkeys, which are kind of a lowly creature that people have made fun of.
Mhm.
And it was really fun too, going back through the Bible and looking at the stories of donkeys. So not only Balaam's donkey who spoke, and we have, something about that in the book, but also that Christ rode on a donkey, at Palm Sunday. And he wasn't on a big fiery stallion with,
Right.
an arched neck and a beautiful flowing mane until he was on a lowly little young donkey. And there's an old Irish legend that the cross on the donkey's back, because there's like a stripe that looks like a cross, came from the reflection of Christ's cross that day. And it's just a beautiful story about an animal that they consider sacred because it carried the Lord.
Wow. Wow. You mentioned this passage in Psalms is there a scripture or a passage or a verse that either maybe is just really important to you or something that was really important to you for this project? Anything come to mind like that?
The story of the prodigal son is all through this book. We don't
Okay.
really mention it a lot, but this is a prodigal son story. And, the prodigal son has to decide to go home, and the father has to decide to accept him with joy. And so that was really, kind of the guiding passage from the Bible for this book for
I
me.
love that. Has to decide to go home. You know, as many times as I have studied, even preached on, been preached to on, if that's right, on Luke 15 and that story of the prodigal son, I do not think that I've ever heard it presented the same way twice. There are so many details, feelings, experiences, people. You can walk around that story a gazillion ways, and it's the same story, but it just continues to teach me.
Yeah, and it's one thing that I was impressed by in that story in relation to sanctuary is that it is not easy to go home
No.
when you have been a broken person and you have broken relationships and caused havoc, in a community, and you have this reputation and you have to go home and
Mm.
face it. It's one of the hardest things to do. And so I think, we need to kind of see prodigals who do make efforts to come home as full of tremendous courage, desperation, but also courage to face all of that. And I feel like that with the story of the prodigal son in the Bible and how the older brother reacted was a great illustration of that.
Yes, yes, it is a great illustration, I think, often of the older brother who also squanders his inheritance. We talk about that a lot in this community because, the father says, everything I have is yours. And our father says that to us as well. But because we're not receiving it, we complain we don't have it, I think, so often, and really the father is saying, no, I'm not withholding anything from you, but you're striving to produce. I mean, I'm talking to myself right now. You're striving to
Mhm.
produce, you're striving to attain something or to prove your worth or something. And the reality is you're in the sanctuary. You just don't experience the sanctuary because you're
Right.
focused on something other than me. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a hard story.
It's a hard story. We could just sit right there. Oh, this has been so great to learn about your work and to learn about this book. I just think it's fantastic. Before I let you go, I always ask my guests this question. Will you let us peek into your life just a little bit? What are you doing right now? Reading, listening to, watching, studying, anything goes that's keeping you connected, inspired, offering you hope, anything like that.
Oh, I love that question. I came upon an ex-Catholic priest. He's now not living anymore, but he died kind of young. His name is John O'Donohoe, and he wrote a book of blessings that I love. He was a poet. And so there's something about poetry, blessings, prayer, kind of told through the lens of Celtic spirituality. And the Irish, have been Christians, they think, since the 200s or 300s. I mean, Christianity came very, very early to Ireland. And they incorporated their tradition of storytelling and music and arts and myth making to tell the story of Jesus and to express their faith. And so I've been reading these poems by him and just, loving that. Sometimes poetry can express the deep things of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I'm doing is working on my thesis. I'm in seminary writing my master's thesis. It's a master's in New Testament. I graduate in June, and the topic is Books Are Alive, a theology of writing. And
Mm.
so the idea of books, coming to life, of the spirit, working with us, a collaboration there, and how all that works out. That's what I'm working on right now.
I think that's fantastic. I think that's wonderful. Are you a poet? Do you write poetry also?
I've written a bit of poetry. I don't think I'm a gifted one, but I love to read it. And I feel like poets are the best writers, and they're often kind of the oddballs of the writing world. And I just love them and want to encourage that.
I love that. I love that. Susy's book is Sanctuary, and you can find it wherever books are sold. And you can find Susy at susyflory.com. And I will link that and her Everything Memoir Facebook group and all the places to find and follow Susy in today's show notes. And Susy, I cannot thank you enough for your time. Thank you for your commitment to writing this beautiful project. And thank you for spending just a little bit of time with us today.
Thanks, Angie. It's been such a blessing.
And friend, thank you for listening. Until next time, peace. Thank you, Susy, for giving 4 years to this project that we might know something more about God and see him a little more in our stories than we did before. All the places to find and follow Susy are in today's show notes. And if you happen to be someone interested in writing down the stories of your life, please check out Susy's free Facebook group, Everything Memoir. The link for that is in the show notes as well. Exodus 25:8, again, this time from the Message. Let them construct a sanctuary for me so that I can live among them. Friends, Susy has blessed us with a giveaway. She is offering a copy of her book, Sanctuary, along with a beautiful map of Ireland to one podcast listener. If you are interested in entering yourself for a chance to win, simply send an email between May 3rd and May 12th, 2022 to steadyonpodcast@gmail.com. I will draw one winner and I will email that winner back at that email address if you are selected. So good luck. Next week, I will welcome Brad Hambrick to the show. Brad sat down with me a while back to talk about navigating the road to forgiveness. Forgiveness is a tangly topic, and there's a lot of layers to it, which is why I think we tend to talk about it on the surface level and avoid talking about it too much on a personal level. I really appreciated Brad's perspective and his encouragement around forgiveness being a journey instead of a one and done. If you haven't yet, I'd be so grateful if you would follow the podcast on whatever directory you're used to listening to. It only takes a second, and it guarantees you'll see new episodes as soon as they drop. Thank you so much for listening. I pray wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.